This is Report to Wyoming.
This show targets local issues that matter right here in Natrona County, where we talk to real people about their thoughts and ideas. In this week's episode, Matt Jolivet joins us to talk about Play, Clean, Go and what each of us can do to help fight invasive species in Natrona County. Jolivet is the superintendent of the Natrona County Weed and Pest. Early on, we discussed the crickets in Edgerton before jumping to their biggest challenges this summer: scotch thistle, Russian and spotted knapweed, prairie dogs, and grasshoppers. This was a good educational conversation, and I've since learned to identify Russian olive trees. So stay tuned to find out why that's relevant. And you live here in Casper?
I do. Yep. Been in Casper for 8 years and been with this will be my 8th season at the Weed and Pest.
Oh, wow. How did you get involved here?
I met my wife. She was from Casper, and so I started with the Weed and Pest in Torrington, and we moved our family up here.
Were you from Torrington?
No, I'm not originally from Colorado Springs, although I try not to tell people that right off the bat. No, I sure love it here, and Wyoming is definitely the place to be. When
you came up here to be the interim supervisor at Natrona County, how different was that from Torrington?
Different sides of the same coin. We're all fighting the same set of noxious invasive species. Our challenges are a bit different with our sagebrush steppe ecology that we have here, where you move east and south in the state, you get more grasslands, sandy, plant communities, that kind of thing, and more row crop agriculture. So same battle, different location on the map. I
had someone I was talking to yesterday who told me there were 62 species of sagebrush. Can you confirm or deny this?
I don't know each one. I mean, certainly I know a few of them, but yes, and that's really important when talking about plants, is having proper identification, or at least really close, is necessary for knowing whether A, it's even a problem, and number two, how to control it.
Right off the bat, I want to talk to you about the crickets. I want to say locusts. Is that?
Yeah.
But they're crickets, right? Over in Edgerton.
In Edgerton, yes. There's quite a hatchbed of Mormon crickets. This is nothing that is out of the ordinary for this country. Certainly it's a high numbers for this year, but it takes you back when you see the number of crickets. And these are Mormon crickets. They do band together, and what they'll do is they'll march, seeking out a lot of broadleaf plants is what their main target is. They've got a very varied diet. They're omnivores. They will eat trees, your garden vegetables, and then certain row crops. So we're monitoring that situation and have the tools at the Weed and Pest if you need to protect a sensitive area.
Would this be like pesticides or?
Yes, they'd be pesticides. Not in all cases, though. Carbaryl brand bait works very well on Mormon crickets.
You'll have to dumb this down for me.
Sure. No, absolutely. But there's a lot of alternative methods of control. Mormon crickets don't have wings. Unlike grasshoppers, they don't fly. They can march a significant distance on their legs, but if you can exclude them physically with a slick surface at the base of your trees, that will prevent them from getting up in there. And so it's a little bit of an outside-the-box solution, but no, all of the methods to prevent damage are not.
I'm seeing lots of comments on people's Facebook posts like, unleash the chickens, unleash the turkeys. Is this a reasonable solution?
Absolutely. They would love to get a hold of a Mormon cricket. They're high in protein. I don't know that that would be a suitable control measure, but they would be very happy while they were munching on Mormon crickets.
It'd be safe?
It would be safe for them, yes.
What would you say is your biggest summer concerns for our region in Natrona County?
Our biggest concern for the summer is probably scotch thistle would be a big one. Leafy spurge is a plant a lot of people don't see because there's a lot of work that goes on in the background to control these species. The other one would be spotted and Russian knapweeds have caused a lot of chagrin to producers and any property managers. Biggest thing to get out, message to get out with people with invasive species is learn how to properly identify it. There's a lot of great resources on the internet or through the Weed and Pest. And then it's a constant long-term battle. A lot of these difficult-to-control weeds have extensive root systems. They may be, in certain cases, prolific seed producers, and so it's not going to be a one-and-done scenario. It takes constant vigilance, especially in the spring and again in the fall for perennial species to fight the battle and win. You have to be thinking on a years-long or decades-long time frame.
Are you guys doing BLM land, government land? Where are you primarily looking at?
We do. We control a lot of the species on public land, and that would be our primary responsibility. But we know the weeds don't stop at the fence line. I haven't seen one yet that pays attention to any no trespassing sign you can put up there. The weeds don't care. So we primarily treat drainages, so we try to prioritize the whole drainage and work with whatever landowners happen to exist on that infestation.
You probably have pictures of the scotch thistle and Russian knapweeds on your site.
I do.
Okay, good.
Yep, like I said, the internet is a good resource if you are making sure it comes from a suitable source, so a .edu or a local government agency usually is a little bit better than just a random plant site. I have found some things lead you astray, especially with the new, there's some plant identification apps on the phone, and I use them a lot as well, but you can be led astray. Lots of times those are just an image search versus a list of identification characteristics.
Yeah, I just noticed that yesterday. Our environment gets so localized that every little species has its own sort of characteristics, and that goes for birds and plants, and kind of the whole environment gets a little bit tweaked by the surrounding area. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And then I just this morning saw a bird, and I was looking in my little bird identification book. I believe it was a warbler. Just a yellow warbler. But looking in the book, I was I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
The picture of there's so many different variations of it. So
sure,
and genders. I don't know.
So yeah, being able to just cross-check that stuff and do thorough research is important. And you may not need to identify it down to exactly what subspecies or cultivar it is, but when we talk about species in terms of identifying them for the purpose of a control method, typically we're trying to exploit a portion of its life cycle, right? So if, for instance, we're dealing with a species that only reproduces by seed, then a mechanical control is perfectly suitable and may, depending on what the situation is, a mower may be the most effective and economical control method. And to give an example is scotch thistle only reproduces by seed. Canada thistle is a very fibrous root system, perennial, that mowing is not going to be adequate. So knowing the difference between those two is significant and will affect your success for control.
Now, what makes something invasive? So in the case of the two plants that you listed first, are they encroaching on something more important, turf? How do you determine that?
Oh, absolutely. So invasive species tend to come into an area and take over. That is a very simple way to put that. They will outcompete the desirable, typically native vegetation, and so they're more successful in their new environment. And for us, that would be Natrona County.
What are the native plants that you're most concerned with? Or I guess I should ask, are you guys concerned with conservation and preservation, or is that another department?
Oh, no, absolutely. We have a very unique opportunity in central Wyoming to control or manage, I guess, our sagebrush steppe habitat, which is important for all of these other species, sage grouse, western meadowlarks. All these other species rely on the sagebrush steppe. If, by chance, you get an invasive species that, let's say, increases the fire return interval and turns it from a sagebrush steppe into a grassland, that will completely ruin the habitat, and it will be lifetimes if ever you get that back. So we are very concerned about conservation of the landscape.
Seen the prison made a tremendous effort to help with this. We have a gallery of prisoners regrowing sagebrush, but like you're saying, it's not easy. It's not as easy as just planting it.
No, and we're talking a lot of times to reestablish sagebrush could be 25 to 100 years. So it's usually not as simple, although they're getting better at targeting those planting techniques, purchasing local seed. It's a lifelong task to reestablish those if they're lost.
It's such a unique piece of Wyoming, too.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are other places where you have sagebrush, but nothing quite like Wyoming.
Yeah, no, and we happen to be right in the middle of the sage grouse core area, and their habitat requirements are very specific to that sage steppe habitat, and that if we lose that ability to host sage grouse and cut that core area down in size, there'll be a lot of economic impacts, there'll be a lot of environmental impacts to that, and it won't be good for our livelihoods and our recreational opportunities here in Natrona County.
Is there anything that's recently cropped up that's been an alarm?
The Palmer amaranth is a species that is probably new to our area. It's going to come in along county roads and agricultural areas, and the reason why it would be concerning is because we don't have very good herbicide tools to control that. So it seems to be resistant to glyphosate, which would be the standard herbicide we'd use in those agricultural areas. You're going to have to come up with a different solution if you have that situation. The other ones are invasive annual grasses. I think everybody in Natrona County knows what cheatgrass is, but there are ventonata grass and Medusa head wild rye that are even less valuable, at least less valuable than the cheatgrass due to unpalatability and different chemistries of the plant, but they tend to be very invasive. And again, if they come into these invasive annual grasses come into an area, increase the fire return interval to where big sagebrush can't reestablish between burning events, and we lose that habitat, probably forever.
How do these new grasses get here?
A lot of times they get here by the seed being transported in from somewhere else. That has to do a lot with human or animal activities. So we have to be careful not to spread those seeds where we don't want them.
Would this be like something people are using for their lawn, or is it something that just more so just gets kind of innocuously attached to fur or clothes, that kind of thing?
I think that would be a lot better description. It would get attached to fur, a vehicle, shoes, and then again to the hide of livestock. If they're coming in from an area that has these invasive species, we need to be vigilant around those areas. If we can, certainly if we can clean either the equipment, maybe that's a little harder to power wash an animal, the mud off of it, but with our vehicles, when we're recreating, fur of our dogs when we travel to a different area, and even within Wyoming, these plants can come in from a different county. A lot of times if you take your vehicle to a parking area with other folks who may be coming from out of state, that is where these infestations will start. And so
they're hitchhikers.
They're hitchhikers, exactly.
That's interesting.
Exactly. And then the key is when we do find those hitchhikers that come through, to get on top of it quickly, because the chances that we're going to be able to completely control a new infestation go down the bigger it is.
Are there any desirable plants that will outcompete, I guess, that are more dominant than some of these more pernicious ones?
Absolutely. And if we keep our rangelands healthy, and so we're not stressing out the plants due to misuse of herbicides is a big one. When we don't keep in mind the health of the other desirable bunch grasses out there, western wheatgrass, prairie sandreed, when we don't keep the health of those species in mind, we open up opportunity for these invasive grasses to come in. And so I would say in general, any type of disturbance that can be avoided should be done. So if that's overgrazing, traveling off-road with the vehicle, will all open up areas for infestation. If we can avoid this disturbance and keep seeds out of these areas, then the plant community that's already there will have a fighting chance.
And is that just because of sheer numbers? There are more. It's more prevalent.
I think it has to do with many, many years of adaptation. You're a tough cookie if you can exist in Natrona County as a grass species, right? You have to be able to put up with drought. Some years like this one, you may be under 2 feet of snow for a number of months, right? You're adapted to be very tough. We don't need to add to their stress level. They've got enough on their plate to try to survive and be healthy. And fortunately, some of these species tend to outcompete those native bunch grasses. We talked about sagebrush. those kind of things.
Have you seen quite a bit of change in the last 8 years?
Every year is different. That's all I can say. Certainly, we're coming off of a winter that saw incredible snow. We had very high soil moisture. Seems to be greening up rapidly, and that's after the year previous. It was 90 degrees in June, and we didn't see a raindrop until July, when it usually dries out. So, and that varied within the county, right? I don't think everyone would agree with that analysis within the county. So, again, I'm amazed at the variation that we have here in central Wyoming.
And we've talked a lot about flora,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as fauna, what kind of pesky pests are you dealing with?
We typically will deal with grasshoppers and prairie dogs, and there are many species of grasshoppers. About 6 of them tend to be very damaging for forage grasses, and so they do have varied diets depending on what species they are. And so we go out and we survey in the spring and try to determine at what level those infestations will become economically significant, and we'll put blocks together. A little bit harder than the weeds because you have to treat them in very large areas. Spot treating grasshoppers has minimal effect because when they turn into adults, they get wings and they go and fly to your neighbors and will leave eggs in the ground for the next year. Prairie dogs are another one. They can be very destructive on the one hand. They like to clip roots off of plants, take all of the forage off of an area where you have a high amount in a prairie dog town. Part of the reason why they do that is they need nutrition and they like to eat the roots and plants. Another reason they destroy those areas is because they don't like visual barriers, right? They don't want to be snuck up on by a coyote or a fox, a badger. And so they can be very destructive. But on the other hand, they do provide an ecosystem service. And so that gets to be an interesting conversation, and certainly they can be very economically damaging. And the weed and pest will help people who want to reclaim that land, but also keep in mind they're important for our ecology and that sagebrush steppe habitat.
It's got to be frustrating always working out a balance, because that's what I'm hearing when I think, the ecology,
Mm-hmm.
everything, there's this give and take to it all. And so
Yes.
figuring out how many is too many, that's kind of
Right.
odd. How do you guys make these determinations?
Well, there are certain species where that is easy. Leafy spurge, I think if we have anyone here who was trying to graze livestock or go and recreate in the 1980s and 1990s, they'll know that a lot of area was ruined by the presence of leafy spurge. And so in that species case, we go after every last one. And we know what can happen if that's left to spread down drainages and it'll ruin a lot of land value. Some species are finding a balance where you're looking more at the economic injury level, right? Because it costs money, it costs time to control these. And so finding that proper control method that is the biggest win is the hardest part. And usually that is knowing where the economic injury level is. So they do vary from species to species, but we don't want to spend $10,000 controlling a pest or a weed species that's damaging $1,000 worth of habitat or a crop. So unless, of course, that it's going to affect the value for years down the road. So again, it is a balance. I think that's a good way to put it. And thinking long term is usually the key to making a good decision.
Now, sometimes when people visit, they go, oh, it's just sagebrush, and they want more trees, or people who move here, and so there's a big effort to plant more trees and flowers. And does that ever disturb the environments you guys are seeing? Just people bringing in different seeds of like domestic plants and trees?
Oh, sure. And of course, a lot of those species that they would like to plant are simply not going to survive here. There's a reason why We don't see trees all over the country. They're kind of limited to riparian areas, Platte River corridor, and then the forest in the mountains. It's tough to be a tree in this country. So I would strongly encourage people to consult an expert, find a species that's going to work, and then be reasonable about how much inputs you want to put on there. If you're going to have to water this twice a day for 3 years, are you willing to put that effort in when you plant those trees? If you are, great. Hopefully you get to the point where the amount of effort will be reduced. But the other thing is getting seed and nursery stock, whatever plants you're going to plant, from a local source, a reputable dealer that's not going to have an invasive species in the soil or in the pot is important. And I would say a lot of our local greenhouses and businesses, especially if they are only in Natrona County, would be a good place to start.
Because you see online when you Google things, like, oh, you can grow this, and this in Zone 5, but there's more to it than that. So
yes, absolutely.
I don't know. I want a black walnut tree. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Absolutely, I think that would be amazing.
Or fruit trees.
Mm-hmm.
People have them, but it's different across the county.
There is.
So,
and there's actually quite a few apple trees along the Platte River corridor. They'll do okay. And again, they take a lot of inputs, and they need the appropriate microclimate not to desiccate in our extreme wind. Mm-hmm. But apple trees are a viable option for Casper.
I've looked around. The neighbors don't have a whole lot of trees.
No, and if they do, they're probably Russian olive trees.
Which is this good or bad? Or I don't know if you like to classify it in those binary terms, but
I was curious of whether I wanted to go here or not. So
okay.
Russian olives are on the noxious weed list, which means we can and are expected to have a successful control program for them. Russian olives also, if we've been around Casper, are probably the most successful windbreak planting tree that we have. They take really minimal care. What I'm going to say is the reason why that tree has a negative impact on our community is in the plains cottonwood, narrowleaf cottonwood galleries on the side of the Platte River, right? And they get on waterways, and they tend to physically spread very fast, where they will crowd out and shade out the other riparian understory species that you have. So I don't necessarily I'm not telling everybody to go out with a chainsaw and cut down their windbreaks, but we have to be knowledgeable about why they have an impact. And that is getting into cottonwood galleries that are sensitive ecosystems and crowding out the native vegetation. If these trees can be adequately managed in a hedgerow or windrow, they are a tool people have to fight the wind around their property.
But that balance,
again,
always back to it. Yeah.
That balance, exactly.
But so when you say cottonwood galleries, you're basically saying they're out competing cottonwood trees.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as well as all the other understories. We got choke cherries, hawthorns.
Any other big agenda items for you this summer?
We are going to try to join with Play Clean Go on Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is the 3rd through the 10th of June. And again, maybe I'll just give a plug to go out in your backyard, see what you have, try to identify a few plants. If you think something might not be kind of acting naughty in the backyard, bring it into the Weed and Pest, or give us a call and we'll accept a picture of it and see if we can find out what it is, because we want you to have an enjoyable experience. And then also want to get the message out that when you don't have to be a major landowner or land manager to make a huge difference in our invasive species fight. When you are out recreating, running around the hills with vehicle or even just your shoes or your dog, understand that you can be moving species around from one place to another. And so it will pay big dividends if you can clean off your equipment, before moving from one place to another. And even on a small scale, if you're a farmer and you're going from one field to the next, don't bring that infestation that you have in that one field to the next one. It will pay dividends to get the power washer out, scrape off those roots that are on the harrow, whatever it is. So again, let's find our balance and keep invasive species out of our community.
And when is Play Clean Go?
Play Clean Go is June 3rd through the 10th, so it starts tomorrow and goes through the 10th. Play Clean Go is more of a outreach organization, and so it just provides materials for social media to get the message out about invasive species. And so if you check out their website and you want to put a social media campaign together, they have tools and resources for that. The idea of this Play Clean Go is kind of to go along with Drain Clean Dry, so more of a terrestrial bent, I guess, than the Game and Fish has a Drain Clean Dry, which is get the mussels and Eurasian water milfoils and stuff off your boat before you go from one place to another. But we wanted to expand that message out to terrestrial invasive species. And so it's the exact same concept, and we're going to use this week to promote getting the message out to folks that they can make a difference when they're out recreating. Stay on the trail, buy firewood that's local, so don't bring firewood from 3 states away and go and bring it up to our mountains. We don't want all the issues that could come from that. And clean off your pets, equipment, of course.
This has been Report to Wyoming, presented in the public interest by Town Square Media.